Priya Hunt, an executive coach whose mission is to inspire leaders like you to thrive and make an even bigger impact. Welcome to Ideasparks. This is a discussion focused on a leadership topic to spark some ideas in us by talking to people who bring their really varied and interesting perspectives to the subject. Hybrid working has become a way of life after the COVID pandemic, and I am delighted to introduce three people who bring some varied perspectives to this topic. Rob, Manick, and Jamie, welcome. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. So Jamie, let me start with you. Tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, thanks, Priya. So Jamie Dru, I'm a career coach. I've been working all over the world for the last few years. I'm in the UK at the moment, but I've lived and worked from Colombia, Mexico, Ecuador, Spain for a bit as well. And that's really part of who I am. I was born in Dubai and lived all over the world. So that's a bit about me. I also have a podcast and like to write a lot. And in my spare time, I go climbing quite a lot as well. So that's a bit about me.
Exciting life, Jamie. I think I've decided that we call you a global nomad, which sounds like
okay.
an exciting term.
All right, let's go with that.
And Manick, let's hear about you.
So, hi everyone. I'm Manick Pooradam, and I'm based in London. I'm an exec coach, and I'm also the recommend lead for the Europe and APAC business for the company that I work with, pretty much in the technology services business that we are in, and I'm based in London.
Great, welcome, Manick.
I'm looking forward to have a good session.
Excellent. And Rob, I think I know you the longest amongst the three of us, so welcome again, and tell us a bit about you.
Well, I think we all have some commonality in executive coaching, but my main job is I've worked 30 years in finance, 15 years in management. I'm a managing director at the American investment bank Citi, and I have researched this topic for work at Citi, but just to be clear, the views I'm talking about today are not Citi views. I actually did a dissertation for a master's in executive coaching behavioral change at Henley Business School on exactly this topic, kind of the challenges managers face in the new world of hybrid work, hence the reason why we're speaking today.
Excellent. Brilliant. Welcome, everybody. And Rob, let me start with you because, of course, you've done your master's dissertation on this. But let's start with the definition. How do you define hybrid working so that everybody is on the same page?
Well, I hope it sort of is what it says on the tin, really, but it's basically sometimes in, sometimes out of the office. And for many people, that's working from home, but it really can be working from anywhere. And we all know that pre-pandemic, although the technology was there, actually hybrid work modes were pretty low. I mean, roughly 5 or 6% in most of the developed world, shot up in the pandemic, obviously forced out of the office to about 61%. And then the view is that they kind of settled down roughly about half of all work could be done remotely in theory. Roughly the consensus is for 3-2, as in 3 days in, 2 days out, which means about 20% of work will be done going forward in a hybrid setting. So that's the kind of hybrid 2.0, and that creates some pretty big challenges for managers who are having to navigate some new things. And that's really what the dissertation looked at.
Fantastic. Jamie, you've taken hybrid work to a different level all over the world from what we hear. So tell us a bit about what does this mean to you as a person working in a hybrid fashion?
Yeah, thanks, Priya. I guess, I mentioned it earlier, I was born in Dubai and we've sort of lived all over the world when I was a child. So I was definitely nomadic before I was a digital nomad, and have always enjoyed sort of connecting with other cultures and countries and people. I think I probably got a bit of a head start on the hybrid working sort of setup. In 2018, I was given a consulting project that took me all over the world. So I was always sort of, I guess, largely in an office, but those offices took me from Tokyo to San Francisco and everywhere in between. So I got to get used to working at home, in cafes, in offices, on planes, on trains, the lot, and that style of working really suited me. And I think that when the pandemic came and it forced everyone to adopt those working practices, I had a bit of a head start, so it didn't feel as clunky and difficult to me. So I guess I was quite fortunate with that. And as to what hybrid working or remote working means for me, I guess it's the flexibility in the how and the when and the where I work from. It means more recently being willing to sacrifice certain things. In my work at the moment, that can mean sleep, getting up really early or staying up late, but then you get the payoff, which is you get to slower travel, and you get to spend longer in places, or you get the ability to go for a run with the dogs in the morning, rather than having to get on a train and head into the city and start work. And so I think it's, I guess, that remote or hybrid working approach means flexibility, and with that there's some less sexy stuff that comes with that as well, and we can talk a bit more about that as well. But I think that the flexibility to find work that suits, and do it in a way that suits you and aligns with what you're about and who you are, is something that's really important to me.
And the flexibility word is great, but the other thing that came to mind when you said that is also it's a lifestyle choice almost, isn't it? It's a choice you're able to make to be working when you're willing to. Great. And Manick, as a leader in the HR function, how do you think organizations can keep, hybrid working in mind to attract more talent? What do they need to do differently?
So that's a very critical question, Priya, for the current scenario that we are in. So as I see, as I've been hiring people across the European and the Asia Pacific market, there is a highly pronounced interest among the workforce seeking hybrid work environment, or there are some regions where they predominantly look for 100% work from home or a remote work and setup, which is also kind of triggered since the pandemic, and that has kind of put in a lot of challenges to some of the organizations who are more concerned about the security aspect when it comes to the technology security, and because pre-pandemic, all the organizations, they used to work in a very secure environment. And it's just the non-technical people who have had the flexibility of working from home or working from anywhere. Whereas when it comes to the technology folks, they have to work in pretty much in a secure environment. Pandemic kind of shattered the thought process. So now it has become an old school of thought saying that work can be done in a secure fashion, even if people work from any other network. So organizations are really gearing up in terms of how they can secure the data, even if their workforce work from outside of the workplace secured environment. And in terms of the sentiment from the workforce is that, given that they have enjoyed this work from home or work from anywhere, particularly the remote work option over the last 1.5 years, they really didn't want to get back to the full-time work model, because, as you rightly mentioned, flexibility, and that also added the social life outside of the work, which kind of they have been really able to balance a lot over the last few months, and when they have been trying out the work from home environment. So it is a bit of a global trend and widely pronounced across all the regions that I've been looking at. And in some regions, they are kind of demanding for 100% work from home environment. And organizations are really have to look at security aspects in terms of the deliverables. At the same time, employee engagement and of course about how they retain the talent. So these are the few aspects organizations have to look forward.
Interesting.
Priya, if you don't mind, just if I can just jump in on the back of what Manick said, because one of the things I've noticed is that this is a very dynamic situation. It continues to change. And Manick talked about the fact that security, in theory was an issue, but actually there are solutions for that.
Yeah.
If you go back 20 years when the internet started, there was a view of the death of distance, and there was lots of talks around virtual teams. And What happened was, in a lot of cases, the connectivity really wasn't very good. And so it really stalled out for many years.
Yeah.
What we found actually surprisingly in the downturn was, in the pandemic, was although people feared that productivity would be very bad, actually the conclusion from most empirical studies, and including my one from the pandemic, was that actually productivity can be enhanced. There are reasons for that. So what the debate's now moved on to in terms of some of the challenges is, for example, if we don't get people together, does that impact collaboration? And actually, the study that I had concluded that actually it's a lot more nuanced than that. And there's a very good study by the Oxford Martin School recently about collaboration at distance used to be a problem, and now actually it can be an enhancer rather than a detractor, very similar to the productivity argument. So, and Manick mentioned this, in terms of the next stage, I think that's up for debate is, where do we go around attachment and alignment and bringing people together? Because I fear that as you start allowing people to work away from the office more and more and not have those social bonds, you end up having the world of work being more transactional. And there's a concern that if you go down that route, then engagement, etc., is a problem. And this alters the psychological contract between the employer and the employee. However, the study that I did concluded that it actually, again, is not as simple as that. There's a lot of workers who are happier having the flexibility that Jamie talked about. There is a lot of people who have lower quit rates and attraction to go to companies that are offering hybrid. And in terms of values and cultures, it doesn't just mean that you have to be in a building to have those things. So the debate really moved on. Where I think the debate, however, is very real, is apprenticeship actually is quite difficult.
Yeah.
And in the study, the number one challenge for everyone really was integrating new hires in a hybrid or remote work situation. And maybe we can come on and talk about some of that. But I think that this apprenticeship situation is something that really needs to be tackled and thought about a little bit more. And let me leave you one final thing on this sort of, this side of the topic, which is my suspicion of this is, when I said it's dynamic, that we are not at the resting place. We are not at equilibrium. We're at equilibrium post the pandemic version hybrid 2.0. Yeah. But I think there is more likely that we're heading towards 2-3, 2 in, 3 out, than we are back to where we were before. And again, we can talk about that should you want to. But again, this is a very dynamic situation with progressive technology. And in this case, I think progressive changes in organizations.
Really interesting points. And Jamie, I'm going to come to you. You mentioned when you were talking about the flexibility, you also mentioned there were some challenges at the same time. So I'd love to explore from your perspective, what are the challenges that individuals face when they're working in a hybrid way? How can you mitigate these challenges?
I think that Rob really hit the main one, which for me is training, learning, apprenticeship, call it what you want. It's you go into the office in your first 3 months, and previously you'd have someone next to you that could look over your shoulder and could give you pointers, and now that just isn't there. And I think that is going to be, I think that's really going to play out as people continue to move around post pandemic and start new roles. I think that's going to get tougher, and firms are going to have to respond to that. I think there's a responsibility on people that are more established in teams to pass knowledge on where they can connect outside. Going into now, in the new hybrid model, people are seeing going into the office as a reason to collaborate, to create, it's still not that ongoing learning. It's not that, oh yeah, the reason your Excel formula isn't working is because of that. Let me just click, oh yeah, now it's okay. That's really, or your PowerPoint slides off because you haven't aligned your boxes to the left. Here's a sneaky shortcut. These are the things you learn when you're cutting your teeth as a new graduate, as an apprentice. And this is a secret, Priya, I'm a huge hybrid working hypocrite. Like, I find it wonderful. I think it's absolutely brilliant for me, but I'm so grateful that I am not at the start of my career and having to step into this environment. I think I would find it quite difficult. And then I think just personally I think the other thing that from a remote as opposed to hybrid, but I guess it plays across both, is connectivity and just that feeling of connection with whether it be a firm's culture, whether it be with your team, we are all we're human beings at our core, need to connect with other human beings. And I think there's a realignment that I'm doing right now, which was, wow, great, I get to do remote and get up in the morning and go for a run and then start work, or I can go for I can take my lunch break and not worry about all the rest of it. But now it's, well, am I missing that connectivity with other people? Do I need to start going out and touching the people and seeing people again? Because it's actually good for me as a human being, and it gives me more energy. And I think I'm realigning back along with the rest of the world. But I think that that if you need to find connectivity and community in your work, and if you can't find it, you create it for yourself as well. You know that you and I met through I Established a Community, and one of the main reasons was I didn't want to just be sat on my own in an office, somewhere in the world, without that feeling of connection with other people and sharing learnings and sharing ideas. So I think those are two of the main challenges that I think that the hybrid world sort of poses.
Some people are very organized in their lives, and they, like you said, they go for a run at a break or do whatever. But I've also met other people who've been glued to their seats from whatever, 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock in the evening, do not take breaks. Is there a well-being aspect of this that, you know, employers and employees need to be worried about? And throwing it to anyone, Manick, you go for it.
I'd like to add here, because I've had practical scenarios in my own team. So I have teams working across regions, as Rob was mentioning. The productivity has really enhanced for people who have been working from home these days, because we have been cutting down on travel back and forth, and we have been cutting down on the lunch hours, no chatting times and no coffee breaks. Coffee can be had just while you're working from on your desk and things. That has actually been creating a lot of physical ailments for the individuals. Cancer, spondylosis, severe backache, and severe pain in the varicose vein because of the posture that we sit. So those kind of challenges are really been posing for the employees that I have faced, and especially for women, for the physiology, when they do not use the toilets for longer, they are prone to UTI, which is which can trigger the various of the side effects in their health, and eventually that reflects in the way they show their emotions at the workplace. So that is one of the major challenges that I have faced among my own colleagues. So that's something which we have to be really cognizant of and ensure. So this comes to, again, an individual practice and a discipline, saying that, yes, I will have to ensure that I take enough breaks. My Fitbit or my watch has to tell me, before that helps me, I should make it a point that I get up my feet and make a move and do the necessary activities for my body. Otherwise, that becomes a major challenge. So that came to my mind when Jamie was also talking about, and then the social interactions. Rob actually hit on the bullseye, saying that especially about the millennials that we are hiring and the young generation that who's been kind of brought into the system. Integrating them has become a challenge, and that's one of the reasons in the organization that I'm with, and we have been kind of encouraging the leaders to be coming to the office so that the leaders are there to guide the newcomers. And we make it, of course, there is no compulsion in terms of, coming into the workplace, but it is a point that it definitely adds a lot of value for the leaders to be in the office, and which in a way kind of enhances the integration of the newcomers into the organization. It's just for the new, the graduates, even there are new employees, seasoned workforce, who have been newly hired into the organization. Even that integration also takes a long time if they're just, handling things remotely. So social interaction is a major challenge, is getting impacted because of the remote work.
Interesting. And Rob, you started mentioning it as well. In addition to what Manick has said, what other challenges do you see leaders facing in this kind of a climate, and how can they equip themselves better?
There's a great book by Owens called Smart Work, and he says this is the greatest management leadership challenge in 200 years. Now, I don't know whether that's correct or not, but there's obviously a lot of things that are happening. Just on some of the things that I talked about, productivity should be okay, but let's be blunt. We need to have a trade-off between autonomy on the one hand and accountability on the other. And you need to basically measure outcomes as part of that. A friend of mine used to say, I used to get 4 out of 10 for turning up to work. We need to pay for performance, not pay for presenteeism, for example. I can go through it on the collaboration, but we do need to do some things differently. I mean, just to give you a stat, if I'm working 2 days a week from home, 3 days in the office, and I've got a team of 5 people, the random probability that we're all in together is just 8%. Okay, so we need to change that. We need to basically have logistical coordination to make sure we're in together. And then when we're in together, if we're going to be collaborating, let's not have our head in a PC. Yeah. Let's make sure we have collaboration space and collaboration time and what's called location-based work. Okay, so there's this phrase, the office is the new on-site, and I think there's some truth behind that. And Jamie touched on it in his area, but we need to grow the networks. There's also evidence, and the survey that I did sort of said the same as well, which actually collaborating with your team is relatively easy, but collaborating with other teams becomes even more difficult, and you need to grow your networks. And a lot of people have client lists. We'll have a network list to make sure you're reaching out to people, etc., to do that. But one of the most important things on collaboration on this bit, just to be clear, is that the most important factor for collaboration is the alignment of interests and managers getting people together. And that itself sounds easy and can be very often very difficult because there's lots of competing priorities. So, and let's not shy away from that. I mentioned it briefly. I could talk about it more, but when I talked about attachment and some of the challenges that managers face, I think it's really important to make sure we're hiring people who have the same values and the purpose of the organization. And we need to design a culture that can incorporate those things as well. So again, it's not just as simple as having an office. It's about much bigger thing than that. And then when it comes to apprenticeship, which I mentioned, look, there are things you can do for new hires, like letting your network extend for theirs, introduce them to things, packs and mentors, etc. But while it is very true, and JB talks about this, that learning by hanging around or learning by osmosis, those small things really do matter. I actually think it's more cultural. You can be sitting next to someone who never really helps you at all, or you can be sitting 1,000 miles away from someone who helps you a lot. And I think there's an important area of this for cultures of apprenticeship and how we want them to develop. And actually, you won't be surprised to know this was a byproduct of the dissertation. But one of the ways of helping managers to learn more about that is actually giving them mentors and coaches. That there was actually a statistical significance of managers who had coaches to help them through this sort of change element. And one of the things I really hope as a byproduct of this is that when you don't have someone sitting next to you, you have to change your management style somewhat. And a coaching management style to help personalize learning is something that I think is important for organizations to sort of adapt to a little bit more as well. So in my world, we've always had what we call KYC, know your client. I'm kind of calling it KYE, know your employee, because everyone is different, and how you help them includes understanding them and understanding how they kind of progress and develop as well. So look, lots of challenges, but also we come up with solutions, and COVID showed that we adapt to that, and we'll carry on adapting to make sure it's optimal going forward, even if it is a bit discombobulating in the meantime.
Love that word, discombobulating, indeed. Jamie, you started this community when over COVID, which has now really grown, and we've all settled in a community of coaches. It takes quite a lot of bravery to start something like that, because you don't know how people will react, what people will say, and it's a lot of pressure on your shoulders. How did you deal with that?
I didn't know there was any pressure on my shoulders, Priya. I've quite enjoyed it. Look, I think Rob mentioned something which was, Rob, correct me if I get this wrong, but it's sort of there's alignment of interests, and you want to team with people that it doesn't feel a chore. You've got a shared interest, right? Actually, if I'm in financial services, well, I'm really interested in a new fintech that's sprung up, right? Well, let's pull a team of us working across different teams, across the divisions, across the company, that all want to go and learn about this fintech together, because it's going to impact your KYC team, it's going to impact your sales trading teams. Like, let's go and learn about it together. And so when I set up the community you're part of, which is a marketing and business development community, it was with that shared interest in mind. And then it comes becomes actually a lot easier. It doesn't become a forcing of people together. It becomes a set the intent, set the purpose. Right, this is something I want to learn about. Who wants to come and learn about this thing with me? Yeah, right. You want to come along? Right, join in. Let's go. So I found it. I found it relatively easy to do that because of the intent and setting the purpose at the start, and now it's a really enjoyable community that I'm proud to lead, and found many of the things that I was lacking previously: the connection, the shared interest, the learning that allow sort of facilitates.
And maybe that's the way forward, communities of learning across a hybrid world.
Jamie reminds me of a thought that I've had. It's a parallel universe, but I think it might be relevant. There's a lot of people who think, just standing around the water cooler, bumping into people in the office is really great, and it is. But it's quite haphazard and random. And actually, technology can help you have these shared communities of interest. And I think of it a little bit like, and I've been happily married and still happily married for several decades, but a bit like the online dating. I mean, now you can basically, more than 50% of people meet people through online dating, and there will be times in the future where algorithms will match people to interests to be able to make sure we have those moments of collaboration, even if they start virtually, a bit like online dating that then hopefully moves to non-virtual. So I think that, again, there's a problem to be solved, but as Jamie talks about it, we'll get there. We'll solve some of this.
Bob mentioned something earlier as well. It's the tools and the technology is playing catch up now. Like we as a world we've jumped into pandemic, jumped out of it again, and there's still catch up. The ways we collaborate and come together as teams and connect virtually as well as in person, there's still some lag there. And I think that we're in this transition phase, which when there's some tools out there, which I'm sure that some brighter people than me that are out there already creating these things that will be a lot better than Zoom or like online whiteboards. These things are going to get easier, and it's going to get easier to collaborate and come together over time, I'm sure.
And virtual reality probably is not virtual anymore. It's a different word altogether. Manick, I was curious to see, you already talked a bit about what people are expecting now in terms of what they want organizations to do. But are there any other patterns, new patterns that are emerging about what people are looking for from companies?
So the kind of patterns that I see are people make it very clear before being, or at the time of submitting a resume or the application, saying that I will be more interested to take up this job if and only if it's going to be, say, 100% work from home, or if it's going to be coming in with a hybrid option. And so that expectation setting has started pretty much, because what we have seen over the pandemic is there has been a huge churn of employees happening, and there has been a great resignation that we have been facing over the last 1 year, and that has kind of triggered the organizations to really gear up themselves in terms of setting the expectations with the workforce, and it's on the other side as well. The employees, the future workforce are also setting the expectations with the employers. So that's one common trend that is there. And interestingly, the Gartner report says that during pandemic, it was about 28% of the workforce were doing work from home globally, and because there are companies who kind of ask their employees to report back to work, but that would kind of go up to 48% by 2030. So, which means the remote work is going to stay. It's just that the organizations have to prepare themselves to see as to how they can ensure all the challenges that we discussed in terms of health, well-being, mental health, collaboration, interaction. Eventually, we all come with solutions towards it. And at Genpact, where I work for, so we have a lot of such tools, virtual applications that really help us connect. Rob was talking about water cooler. So we have an app called Water Cooler, where we kind of connect with any employee anywhere in the world. It is a very random thing, right? So we connect with them and talk to them, schedule a time. So I can connect with a colleague sitting in United States or somebody sitting in Japan or Singapore, talk to them about their role they are in, kind of. So that kind of software kind of has been available already with us. And typically about the learning and development. So we again have a lot of in-house builds and even other software applications, which is kind of enabling the learning among the employees. And all of the employees have access to a particular platform called Genome, where we have been encouraged and we encourage our employees to spend time in learning at their own pace. And so we kind of get reports in terms of how much our employees have been kind of engaged with regards to learning. So pretty much a lot of such activities which potentially would have been done directly or physically have been digitized. So we are kind of moving towards that trend, and those kind of digitalization is something that will be the norm going forward across.
Yes, it sounds really interesting. I'd love to try that water cooler app one day. As we bring this to a close, I'd love to hear from each of you a practical tip on how to manage either ourselves or our teams while we are working in a hybrid fashion. And Rob, I'm going to come to you first.
Is this a practical tip? I don't know. Well, two words I would say would be lean in. What I mean by that is, look, there is a trend change. I think we went through a kind of one-way door, but we had a number of shocks. We just had a massive societal health shock, but with it came to change in some assumptions. For example, I don't need to commute every day to work, and a change in habits. I can be more flexible. I can watch my child play sport and then catch up on the weekend or the evening, wherever else may, and also values and the structure of the jobs. But I think that we might be going through an economic downturn, which could change the power dynamic more towards the employer than the employee currently. And there will be a temptation, because more employers want people back in the office, there'll be a temptation to try and drag people out. But I would say that what will happen is we will come out of the other side of that. And we've already talked about the fact that this technological change is not going to stop. It's going to carry on progressing. And you mentioned the metaverse and virtual reality. We are headed more towards a world like that. And you think about where we've come from with the cloud and mobility and mobile phones and everything else. So the technology will continue. The conclusion from the study that I did said, actually, it's challenging hybrid, but it gets easier the more that you do it. And most importantly to me, you have happier, healthier, and potentially more aligned employees, which can be good news for employers. So I think of this as being a win-win opportunity, as long as we make sure we continue to lean in rather than do the opposite and lean out. So that would be my end message.
Great point. Thank you, Rob. Jamie, let me come to you.
Thanks, Priya. Yeah, I think practical tip, I don't know, maybe keep your environment fresh. I think that I think wherever you end up working, whether it's in an office, whether it's at home, and just I would encourage people to find new environments when it suits as well, and just because it does create a bit of new. I found I've been more creative when I'm in certain environments rather than others, and it doesn't have to just be at home or in office. The whole point of hybrid is you can work from different locations, and I think that when you try somewhere new, it often sparks a new way of thinking and a different perspective. So my encouragement would just be try and keep your environment fresh. Great
tip. Thank you, Jamie. And Manick.
So I would like to close by saying that there is a lot to be done with the leadership across the organization. Inclusive leadership is something that we have to look at. And that is something which all of the leaders globally, and even the employees themselves, have to put themselves in the shoes of the leaders and then look at things at a larger perspective, so that as Rob mentioned, it will be a kind of a lean-in approach rather than a one-way approach.
No, that's really great. I mean, what I'm hearing from all of you is we're at the cusp of something that's still changing, still evolving. It's done a lot of change over the last couple of years, but it's still evolving. But there are lots of opportunities there, which comes from technology, which comes from attitude. There is a bit of organization, self-organization that we, as well as leaders, as well as our companies, need to get around. But Jamie, in your words, probably, the world will be your oyster once we really embrace this and we settle down into this way of working. Thank you so much, all of you. It's been a real pleasure having you on Ideasparks. Thank you.